welcome you all to today's webinar on protein diversification, a really key strategy for building a more sustainable and resilient food system while also unlocking meaningful growth opportunities. So thank you again for being here and taking the time to be a part of this important conversation. My name is Caroline Bushnell, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Corporate Engagement at the Good Food Institute. And today I am joined by Rayan Kassem, the Engagement Manager on Food and Agriculture Transformation at the World Benchmarking Alliance. His role really focuses on advocating corporate accountability and engaging stakeholders around the food and agriculture benchmark findings, which he'll be discussing with us today. He has a background in environmental sciences, is a youth advocate, a facilitator, and has experience in mobilizing multi-stakeholders in Global South countries towards environmental protection and policy reforms. We're also joined by Christoph Schmidt, the senior expert scientist leading the Plant Protein Strategic Network at Nestlé Research. He has a PhD in biotechnology and food processing from Nancy University. And he's published more than 100 papers or book chapters and recently co-edited a book on plant protein functionality in collaboration with many other researchers worldwide. He's also the co-inventor of 70 patent applications supporting several Nestlé product launches and serves on the advisory board of the Bridge to Food Global Plant-Based Group. So thank you both so much for being with us today. Here's a quick look at our agenda for our time together. First, Rayan will share insights from WBA's 2023 Food and Agriculture Benchmark, really focusing on their protein diversification indicator, which measures how companies are integrating alternative proteins into their portfolio. And next, we'll hear from Christoph about Nestlé's approach to protein diversification, including their portfolio strategy and some R&D considerations. And then finally, I'll wrap up by sharing a few case studies of retailers that have set public targets for protein diversification, along with some key consumer insights on the levers to driving consumer adoption. We'll leave around 10 minutes at the end for your questions. Please do submit those using the Q&A box rather than the chat. That will really help us track them more easily. And you can feel free to submit those anytime during the webinar, but we will answer them at the end in the Q&A session. And then just a quick note, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. We'll also email a copy to all registrants. So before we dive in, just real quick, for anyone who isn't familiar with the Good Food Institute, GFI is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing alternative protein research and science, advocating for fair policy and public investment in alternative proteins, and working with partners across the food industry to help build a more sustainable, secure, and just protein supply. In addition to our work in the US, GFI has affiliate offices in key regions driving alternative protein innovation across the world. And if you're interested in learning more about protein diversification strategies, my team would love to connect with you. So please do feel free to email us after the webinar. Our contact information is listed at the bottom right-hand side of this slide, corporate@gfi.org. And with that, I will turn it over to Rayan to kick us off.
Perfect. Thanks, Caroline. And hi, hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. And I'm going to go straight into it just for the sake of time. And please, if you do have any questions, feel free to leave that in the chat. But I'm going to go through the slides fairly in a strict manner. So as an introduction, obviously, you're all here because you have a certain interest in protein diversification, or you do work in this field on protein diversification, alternative proteins, plant-based proteins. And so just to set the scene here, why is this topic important? Why are we here? Now, obviously, protein diversification, or more broadly relating to animal agriculture, animal-based products, has a wide range of effects on our global food systems and our local ones, mostly known about its climate effect. Most of the emissions in food systems are attributed to the emissions from industrial animal agriculture, the effects of land use changes, commodity-driven deforestation, and how that is a primary driver of deforestation and biodiversity loss across the world, especially in the Amazon, and its effect as well on water withdrawal, fertilizer use, soil health, people's health. Obviously, the science shows that overconsumption of animal-based products could be detrimental to people's health, especially non-communicable diseases. And so the topic kind of encompasses a wide range of effects, whether it's on nature, whether it's on climate, and whether it's on people's health, which also opens an opportunity, whether companies do tackle that in the right manner, that they could be addressing all of these effects due to the overconsumption and over-reliance of our food system on animal-based products. And obviously, companies have a huge role to play in this, and this is why we're discussing the corporate perspective today in the transition towards more sustainable and healthier food products. So a very quick glimpse on who we are. I work for a nonprofit called the World Benchmarking Alliance. In a nutshell, we assess the world's 2,000 biggest companies on their transition towards sustainable, equitable, and healthier food systems, but we also do that across other transformations. Next slide, please. Yeah, so what we do is we provide benchmarks, and one of those benchmarks is the Food and Agriculture Benchmark, where we assess the world's 350 largest food and agriculture companies. Next slide, please. And we do that in a publicly available manner. So all the data that we have is publicly disclosed by the companies. That means that the private sector companies generally don't opt in or opt out of the benchmarking cycle because the evidence is publicly disclosed. Next slide, please. And the companies that we have, the 350, are spread across the value chain. So that's down on the bottom, you can see the upstream companies, so all the way from agricultural inputs, all the way onto restaurants and food services. Next slide, please. This is our methodology. I'm not going to go into it. Obviously, we could be adding links to that, and you could check that after the webinar, or if you have any questions, you can feel, or just feel free to drop it in the chat. But protein diversification is just one of an array of indicators we assess companies on. Next, please. So what is this protein diversification indicator that we assess companies on? Generally, what we're aiming to do is to measure a company's adoption of alternative proteins in its portfolio. Out of the companies that I explained across the value chain, we'll be removing the ones that are agricultural inputs and the ones that are agricultural products and commodities, just because they are not directly involved in animal product production, which leaves us with 242 companies of the world's leading food and ag ones that are animal proteins, manufacturers, retailers, and restaurants. The general message here is that our benchmark in 2023 showed that much more action is needed by companies to diversify their portfolios and increase production and consumption of alternative proteins. And we'll dive into the data just to show you exactly how that is. Next slide, please. Perfect. So the definition, or the definitions just in general, what we use as WBA, alternative proteins, as we define them, are plant-based proteins and other alternatives. So this could be cell-based meat analogs. So we're talking about lab-grown meat that is also considered as an alternative protein. In this case, plant-based dairy alternatives. So you can think about your plant-based cheese, your plant-based yogurts, the burgers, so on and so forth. If you are wondering whether seafood is considered as an alternative protein, in our case, we understand that this debate is still going on, and we do, of course, recognize that sustainably sourced and minimally processed seafood products could be definitely a sustainable and healthier source of protein. But for the current benchmark that we have, it is not considered as an alternative protein. And you can see in the screenshot below the definitions of plant-based proteins and alternative proteins. So that also, for example, for plant-based proteins could take into consideration fermented products such as tofu, tempeh, and as we said, lab-grown meat, for example, for alternative proteins. Next slide, please. So this slide shows how we actually assess companies on our protein diversification indicator. and is divided into 4 elements. The first element, element A, we check whether the company discloses qualitative evidence of protein diversification. What could that look like? It could like the company investing into R&D, the company acquiring other companies that have plant-based products, or actually merging, the company stating that it is taking into consideration the reformulation of its products, whether the company is marketing alternative proteins, so on and so forth. But it doesn't look at actual evidence of quantitative reductions or increases in alternative proteins. It just shows that the company has an intention and is doing that. In the second element, element B, this is where we actually check whether the company has disclosed quantitative evidence of increasing alternative proteins. That could look like the company reporting an increase in sales, an increase in the products in their portfolio, or the meals on their menus if the company is a restaurant, for example. That consists of alternative proteins. Element C, and I think, and this is the most important element here, and I'll explain why. So this is where we check whether the company discloses the proportion of alternative proteins to the entire portfolio it has. Why is this important? Because the ultimate goal, obviously, to meet these climate and biodiversity goals and so on and so forth, is that we reduce the rate or the presence of animal-based products. So if we go back to element B, if a company is increasing or is showing quantitative evidence that it is increasing alternative proteins in its portfolio, that doesn't necessarily mean that the company generally is reducing its products of animal origin. So, for example, if the company has 100 products and they have added 2 new items that are alternative proteins, they could be, for example, adding 6 new products that are animal-based origin. So it doesn't really translate into a reduction. What we need is a total reduction. And having the proportion signaling that would mean that ultimately the company is reducing its reliance on animal-based products rather than just increasing the products that are of alternative protein origin. So this is the most important one. And the last element, which most companies haven't met actually on the benchmark, is the company's ambition to set a sales-based target to increase alternative proteins. Let's say from, I don't know, 20% in 2025 to 55% in 2026, for example. So this is how we assess the companies. Qualitative, quantitative, the proportion, as I said, is the most important one, and then a sales-based target. Next slide, please. So what did the results from our 2023 food and agriculture benchmark shows? Just as a note at the beginning, so the 4 elements I just showed you, each of them scores 0.25, and the total score is 1 for this indicator. So if a company met one of those elements, it gets 0.25. If it meets 2, they get 0.25 and 0.25, so that's 5, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, the majority of companies, as you can see on the bottom right, 114 out of the 242 scored 0, which means the majority of companies we assess, and the world's largest companies, have disclosed no information on tackling or addressing the issue of protein diversification. 87 of those companies score 0.25, which means that they've met one of the elements. That could be any of those 4 elements. So the elements aren't prerequisites to the other elements. And then 35 of them, so you can see that is decreasing as more elements are met. 35 of those companies score 0.5, so that means they score 2 elements. And then 6 out of the 242 have scored 0.25. None of the companies have scored a full score of 1. For those 6 companies that scored 0.75, you can see them on the top left. So that's Nestlé, that's with us here today. Sainsbury, you might know it from their milk and chocolate products. Nestlé Corporation, which is one of the world's largest seafood producers. Conagra Brands, which is also an American-based company that has acquired a lot of brands that is also considered a processing and a manufacturing company. Unilever, famously known, and Elior Group, which is a company that provides food services to governments, hospitals, the medical service, and as well as schools and educational spaces. Next slide, please. So how did the most impactful meat and dairy companies perform? So we've zoomed in on the world's biggest 22 meat and dairy companies as highlighted in the report Merchants of Doubt by the Changing Markets Foundation. You can see those 22 on the right-hand side. We have only one company, which is Nestle, that scored 0.75, but you can see that the majority of companies score 0.25, which means that they've only met one of the elements. This is definitely concerning as we're talking about huge giants in the field like JBS, the world's largest meat producer. We're talking about Tyson Foods, which is North America's largest meat processor as well. We're talking about, for example, one of the companies, Gruppe Bigard, which scored 0 down at the bottom. That's the thirdest as well meat processor in Europe. So we're talking about a huge company that have disclosed little to no information about their plans to diversify into alternative proteins. Yeah, next slide, please. So per element that we showed, how did the companies generally show? We could see that over half of the 242, so that's 127, have met the first element. So you can see here that there's a general trend of decrease. So most companies, at least, have provided qualitative evidence. So they've just disclosed or published that they're trying to do something about this topic without actual quantitative evidence. The more we go into the quantitative evidence, the less you see reporting by companies. So on the second element, for example, you can see that 38 companies have only provided quantitative evidence. So that's the companies that have actually shown a sales-based target, like a sales-based approach or a portion of their products being from alternative proteins. Those of which, as we said, disclosing relative proportions, which is the most important element here, are only 8. And then the companies that have an ambition to set a sales-based target are only 2. That's Unilever and PHW Group. So that is as well showing urgent gaps. And again, if one of the gaps needs to be prioritized, it should be element C, which is disclosing relative proportions. Next, please. This is just to show you. This is just to show you the performance by region. So you can see where some of these companies are situated. In South America, you have JBS, one of the world's biggest animal protein companies. In Africa, most of them are based in South Africa and Nigeria, for example, so on and so forth. Yeah, next, please. So what was done well, if we take a glimpse on what the evidence have actually showed and how that was actually measured and scored on the benchmark. So Conagra Brands, one of the top 6 companies that we showed, scoring 0.75. For example, if you look at the evidence that they've provided, they say that their plant-based offerings, so on and so forth, are comprised 68% of all ingredients by volume. So here they're actually showing a proportion, so on and so forth. And then they go on and saying our Guardian brand of vegan plant-based proteins generated more than $179 million in retail sales in the fiscal year 2022. So again, here they show a quantitative target. And so you can see, for example, Unilever on the bottom, which is one of the only 2 companies that has set a target, showing that they have set a target to generate 1.5 billion euros in annual sales by 2025. And you can also see on the right side, Aldi Nord, based in Germany, how they've reported in every year how their vegan and vegetarian products have actually increased. So for example, in Denmark, it went from 68 in 2019 to, that has increased to 2021. But you can see it, for example, in Belgium, it has increased from 37 to 70, for example, and so on and so forth. So this is how we look at the evidence mainly, and this is how they are scored on the indicator. Next, please. So just a quick deep dive onto how Nestle actually scored. So again, Nestle has scored 0.75 out of a total of 1, which means that they've met almost all of the elements except the last one that you can see in red. Nestle has not published or disclosed a sales-based target to increase alternative proteins, but it has demonstrated or showed evidence that it has a sales-based or it has generated high sales of plant-based products, that it has generated over 1 billion Swiss francs in 2022 from plant-based products, and so on and so forth. Next, please. And so general recommendations, the obvious one for Nestle would be to have a sales-based target, and of course to be investing into more R&D in order to diversify their portfolio much more. And we'll talk about some of these products in general that you can see in the basket. Yeah, next, please. And so this is my last slide, and here I just want to send some takeaways from this very quick presentation, I hope. This is showing you how our methodology is going to be changing for our 2026 iteration of this benchmark. Generally, we will stop looking at companies' qualitative evidence. So we will no longer be asking that. What we want to see is demonstrable progress on quantitative evidence. So the companies will be required to be disclosing quantitative evidence. Not only that, but as I said, because element C was the most important, we will no longer be looking at the company's absolute values. Let's say a company generated $120 million from plant-based products. That is no longer enough, because as we said, that should become a proportion of the total portfolio or of the total sales or of the total products that the company has, because the intention is to reduce. And this is how ultimately we could lead to benefits, whether it's on health, whether it's on climate, nature, or biodiversity. So this is the main focus on it here. So again, the main takeaway is a company should be increasing its proportional share of plant-based or alternative proteins. If a company wants to prioritize any of those elements, that is the most important one. Second is, as I said in the introduction, this is a cross-cutting theme. So if companies, or if they do want to meet their climate targets, their biodiversity targets, their nature targets, water, health, food security, so on and so forth, it really is a question of prioritization. So if companies could be prioritizing protein diversification, they could be very well indeed on their way to meet several of those targets all at once by tackling this one topic. And that is a powerful thing. I know that a lot of companies struggle with prioritization, and all of these global agendas asking which topics to prioritize. This is one of them because it is cross-cutting. One thing to watch out for, and as I showed in the previous basket, is when the companies are transitioning towards alternative proteins or plant-based proteins. What we are seeing is that the transition is going towards ultra-processed foods, so that plant-based proteins or alternative proteins of other sorts flooding the market, but as ultra-processed foods. That is ultimately probably if those products are more sustainable than their counterparts, they're definitely not healthier on the long term. There's a lot of science emerging about the health implications of ultra-processed foods. And so that is definitely not the direction or the transition that we'd like to be seeing companies going towards. And I think this is where I would put out a reaching hand for collaboration in terms of how can this transition look healthy for consumers, but also sustainable for the planet when we are diverting away from conventional animal-based proteins. And so in terms of expectations, I think this is where governments could be stepping in to be reforming their subsidies towards supporting plant-based accelerators, startups, but also focusing generally on commodities, beans, legumes, and all the usual plant-based proteins that are found naturally. And so one thing towards investors also, just to end this message, is adopting a true cost accounting approach is probably best for investors to understand their materiality impact of their animal-based products. So the actual true cost of food would be accounted for in this case, and would actually show the scenarios of the implications and its effect. So the true cost of producing high quantities of animal-based products. So yeah, that's it. I'll stop here just for the sake of time. Please, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at the end, or maybe interact with you over chat. And with this, I'll hand it over to Christoph to continue this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ryan, for the kind overview. I think pretty useful, and also thank you for the recommendations. I'll take them quite, I would say, seriously, and will share with my colleagues from corporate engagement and also corporate communication. So what I would like to do in the coming minutes is to walk you through a bit our strategy to address the transition from animal sources of proteins to plant-based. And what I would like to show, it resonates a bit with what Ryan just said. We would like to take actually an approach going from alternative, but also to hybrid type of products, and to end up with considering also only purely delicious veggies, which I will give some examples of what we have in our portfolio. So basically, on the framework on why it's business relevant for Nestlé to diversify, just to let you know that we have actually a net zero roadmap. So meaning that we want to achieve a net zero CO2 footprint by 2050. And for that, actually, we do know that it's primordial, it's very important to decrease the footprint of our animal protein sources. Just to let you know, our raw materials, they account for about 60 to 70% of our CO2 emissions. So this means if we are able to switch from animal-based to plant-based and actually develop products which are more plant-based for our consumers, whether they are actually food or beverages, it will have a direct impact on our sustainability agenda. So this is a bit the framework. If you move to the next slides, basically what you need to take into account if you want today to develop products which contains more plant-based protein. And here I'm referring to a very a nice publication from the Good Food Institute. You have to know that actually it's not so easy because you have many parameters you need to take into account when you do this choice of proteins. And basically you have to combine several of the attributes. Most important ones, nutritional, but also technological. You need to be able to process these materials, these ingredients on your existing lines, or you need to make some investments. But also you need to see how sustainable it is. On the nutrition, 2 points I would like to highlight. Very important to consider the protein quality because you can have some quantities of proteins without delivering the qualities. This is very important. And also important to mention, actually, the nutritional value is also strongly related to the presence of anti-nutritional factors. You also need to make sure that actually your new protein sources, they are actually not containing some contaminants like pesticides, like actually processed contaminants. It's very important to know. And as well, of paramount importance, the cost of the ingredients, because this is a driver for the consumers, as well as flavor and aroma, which will dictate actually the liking or not of the finished product. So how do you navigate through all these ingredients? Basically, within Nestlé, we have actually set for already quite some years networks which are running cross businesses, but also cross R&D. So we have two of them. One is a knowledge network which I had the privilege to lead for 10 years. This network is focusing on the research and developing the knowledge in the area of proteins. And since 3 years, I'm now leading a strategic network, which is more on the development side, trying to accelerate the use of plant proteins in our portfolio. So what we do regularly, I would say every 2 years, is that we are reassessing on all the elements which were present on the previous slides, all the protein sources which are available, especially plant proteins, and we're actually ranking them. This allows us actually to identify which new, I would say, protein sources, or confirm which protein sources from plant origin is likely to be favorable to be used in our products, because you do know that we have a large portfolio of ingredients, but we also have huge volumes of proteins which we have to deal with. So it's very important to make the good choices. To give you a bit of a flavor, so on the most recent assessment which we did, so if you rank, for example, the proteins based on availability and cost on the x-axis versus functionality and cross-business opportunities, the bubble size being actually the nutritional value through the PDCAS of the protein, you see that you have a trio of proteins which are popping up on the top right. It's mainly soy, yellow pea, and wheat, which are currently the major sources which we are building our development with. But you have actually some second runners which are starting to get on the top right corner. I cannot share with you all the names, but these are the ones which we are considering now for our current research and development projects. If you move to the next slides, basically what is very important when you are achieving actually you want to achieve consumer preference is to address different points which are very high on the agenda of the consumers. Of course, we have already discussed the environmental footprints, and the sustainability is very important, but I have to say it's not the primary one which will drive the choice for the consumers. We do know that the basic drivers are mostly taste and aroma. Also, the fact that you are using ingredients which the consumer can easily recognize. Of most important, the nutrition, and actually what are the benefits which actually are delivered to the consumers through your products. And last but not least, also an element of affordability. We do know that there is a strong a push to try to reach parity between actually animal-based and plant-based products, because we do know that this is a strong driver for penetration for the consumers in terms of repurchasing. If you move to the next one, I would like just to emphasize that one of the element also to take into account when you would like to develop your offer of plant-based products is how are you able actually to cover the widest portfolio of products, meaning covering all the supply chain of distribution. And here I believe we do have some advantages because we have strong brands which are covering actually both the chilled but also the frozen and the ambient type of products, which allows us actually to cover both geographies, but also some countries and some geographies where actually the cold chain can be problematic via our ambient products and strong brands like, for example, Maggi, which I will describe in more details in the next slides. So actually, to summarize a bit what I was just presenting before, it's very important that within your R&D strategy and your product development, you are able to combine actually expertise to cover all the elements which allows you to select the right raw materials. This is what is required actually when you are actually defining which type of protein sources you are using. So, and this you can trigger for agricultural sciences. Then you have to take into account actually potential contaminations, pesticides, and nutritional factors for analytical sciences. Very important to make the right mixtures and right choices of proteins for delivering good nutritional properties. Then the strong elements on how you can technically process your material on your lines to make actually appealing food products. And this is to be combined actually with culinary expertise, which can help you by using some local knowledge to deliver products which will be appealing for specific countries. You can also, and this is a strength of Nestlé, work for Nestlé professional with restaurant and offer actually opportunities. And all of that needs to be delivered safely to the consumers through some knowledge on packaging sciences. So once you cover all of that and you combine all of that, you are able actually to develop some products. I would like to give you 3 examples of plant-based products which we have on our portfolio, which will cover actually for the first one the alternative, in this case, to fish, So this is a product which is sold in Europe under the Garden Gourmet brand, and it's an alternative to tuna. It's called Vuna. Actually, it's obtained by wet extrusion of plant proteins, which we are mastering to a level where we are able, through adjusting the conditions for the extrusion and adjusting the ingredients which we are using, we can adjust the texture, the fibrousness, and also actually the sensory properties. So what we are delivering with this product is basically taste and aroma. We're also using recognizable ingredients, namely in this case is pea protein and wheat protein, which are actually locally sourced in Europe. So already the sustainability element is important, but also these two proteins are complementary from an amino acids point of view. So actually you are delivering a PDCAS of one. We also, from a nutrition point of view, we are using a high oleic rapeseed oil, which is rich in omega-3. And on the nutrition, we are communicating on the high protein and the fiber content of the products, achieving on top of sustainability, good nutrition. The other example I would like to show you, which we are strongly focusing on, is also dairy plant hybrids. And this is obtained actually by blending proper sources of plant protein. In this case, is soy flour together with milk, and through enzyme technology, which we have developed internally, we're able actually to combine the two to deliver good nutrition in powdered format, which comes back to what I was just mentioning before on the actually reaching large numbers of consumers and affordable products through actually the ambient type of products. Also important from a scientific point of view, this is the graph, is when you're combining to the right proportion your material, you're also able to select a bit conditions where you can reduce the viscosity of your blend. This is very important because you do know that when you are drying your product, you need to work at high total solids before the drying. So this is a way for us also to be able to process the materials by choosing on top the right conditions and the right mixtures between the dairy and the plant proteins. So here, taste and aroma are delivered, affordability as well, because we are actually combining the milk with soy. Nutrition, so we are claiming high protein, high fiber with these products, also fortified with vitamins and minerals, and actually we deliver the sustainability. The last product I would like to show to you is basically covering products which are mostly composed by legumes, which are processed together. In this case, through the knowledge we have developed on binding systems, because you need to use actually some, I would say, in brackets, glue between the different elements. In this case, spinach, rice, wheat flour, and we have developed good knowledge on trying to find out what are the right combinations, in this case of proteins and polysaccharides, which you can use in order to have maximum adhesion between the materials while delivering good texture and good taste. So in these products which are sold in Europe, we are delivering taste and aroma, recognizable ingredients, nutrition because it's high in protein and in fiber, and as well we have high sustainability for this product. Next slide, please. Just one element to touch on, because Ryan was also saying that actually diversification can be achieved through the use of precision fermented proteins. So just one word on that. So you may have seen that we were testing 2 years ago precision fermented proteins. This was actually in a dairy product which was tested in the US, where we were using actually a precision fermented milk protein, which was produced by Perfect Day. It had very good nutritional and functional properties. It was suitable for vegan and was lactose free. This type of actually test launch allows us to get actually consumer feedback and to know a bit what are the benefits which can be achieved for the consumers with this type of products, and to get also feedback on the communication and the understanding of such type of solutions by the consumers, and to address actually maybe some gaps and some needs which we need to improve for maybe next generations of products. If you go to the last slide, so yes, so key takeaway. So I hope I'll give you a bit of a hint on the basically what you need to put together to be able to achieve a successful transition from animal-based to plant-based protein sources. It's very important to consider protein quality, relevant micronutrient fortifications to avoid actually nutritional gaps, but also sensory experience as a consumer benefit, because sustainability on its own is not enough to actually deliver consumer expectations. And also, what is very important, you need to have a broad actually knowledge on technologies and innovations capabilities to be able to combine them actually to deliver high nutrient density and reduce environmental impact. In the last slides, and I think this will be shared remotely, you will have actually references to the publications and to the elements I have just described. And now I hand over to Caroline for the last part of this webinar.
Great. Thank you so much, Christophe. All right, so on this slide here, you guys can see the alternative protein landscape laid out as a spectrum. And while we often speak to these three pillars as distinct industry segments, we're really increasingly seeing products that are using ingredients produced by one or more of these technologies to achieve better sensory and functional qualities, as Christophe just shared with precision fermentation. And we really expect to see a lot of continued innovation in this hybrid area. There's actually a lot of already products in the market that are using this approach. So Impossible Burger, which is primarily plant-based, uses fermentation-derived heme to deliver that signature bloody appearance and meaty taste. Another example is Mission Barns, which recently announced a meatball made of plant protein with the addition of cultivated pork fat to really increase the sensory appeal. And there's another type of hybrid innovation we're increasingly seeing, which is blended meat products. And those combine conventional animal meat with plant-based or fermentation-derived ingredients. And so hopefully this visualization helps you see the many innovation opportunities that exist to support diversifying your protein offerings. So why protein diversification? Rayan spoke to this a bit, but we really believe setting a protein diversification target is one of the most effective and actionable strategies that diversified manufacturers and food retailers can take to reduce Scope 3 emissions, which are really heavily driven by the animal proteins that they source. So as shown in the chart on the left here, you can see that plant-based meats dramatically outperform their animal-based counterparts in terms of emissions. They're 94% lower on average compared to beef, and even compared to chicken, 67% lower. But it's not just emissions. The environmental advantages really extend across the board. So a recent life cycle assessment from GFI found that plant-based meat reduces the overall environmental impact by 89% across 18 key categories, including things like land and water use. And these findings are consistent with those from multiple other studies. And as you can see in this Costco quote here, offering a broader protein portfolio is increasingly becoming a component of forward-thinking corporate sustainability strategies. Another key driver for setting a protein diversification target is really just to align with evolving consumer preferences, especially among younger generations, a group with growing spending power. So research consistently shows that younger consumers over-index in their purchase of plant-based foods, are more likely to report intentions to reduce their meat consumption, and are more likely to consider environmental sustainability in their purchases. Across 10 countries studied in this report from Credit Suisse, including the US, UK, Germany, Brazil, China, 2/3 of young consumers say they plan to spend more on plant-based meat and dairy alternatives in the future. So companies that are proactively diversifying their protein portfolios are better positioned to capture the loyalty and spending of this next generation of consumers. And one other reason I'll point out to invest in alternative proteins is their potential to reduce the supply and price volatility. That is just inherent in animal-derived proteins, as they're highly susceptible to external shocks, such as disease outbreaks and geopolitical instability. As you can see in these charts, over the past decade, the prices of eggs, dairy, and their derivatives have swung pretty dramatically, which impacts both manufacturers' margins and retail pricing. Today, we know current strains of avian flu are threatening not just poultry, but also dairy production. And alternative proteins are relatively insulated from many of these external shocks because their production systems are more controlled and predictable. All right, so Christoph just shared with us what a WBA top-rated CPG approach to protein diversification looks like. So I wanted to share just a few examples from some retailers that are leading the way here. In 2023, Carrefour announced a major partnership with 7 suppliers aimed at collectively generating 3 billion euros in plant-based product sales by 2026. And the coalition's objectives include introducing new plant-based products to expand the category assortment, testing taste and flavor innovations to help drive repeat purchase, jointly organizing major sales promotions. They're building on a really successful joint campaign from 2022. Also recommending recipes so consumers know how to easily prepare these products, and overall collaborating on best practices to accelerate the development of these high-quality, affordable alternatives. And I think this initiative really demonstrates the powerful role that retailers can play in shaping the plant-based category, and is a really excellent example of how partnerships can elevate the whole sector. Notably, Carrefour surpassed their initial individual sales target of 500 million euros, well ahead of schedule, and have since raised that target to 650 million euros. Another strong example comes from Lidl, another major European retailer. In Germany, Lidl saw the sales of their plant-based meat and dairy products increase by 30% when they lowered the prices to match or beat the prices of the comparable animal products. This had started as a market test, but apparently was successful enough that they've made these price changes permanent. Alongside these price changes, they've also implemented strategic merchandising, placing these products directly alongside the conventional counterparts, which really helps to boost visibility and drive purchases by new consumers. Beyond boosting these plant-based sales, these strategies also have other profitability benefits. So according to Circana research, customers who frequently purchase plant-based meat actually visit grocery stores much more often and spend twice as much per trip compared to the average customer. So it's a valuable consumer to have in store, and will impact overall customer loyalty and basket size, not just growth in this single category. This example here is from a major US natural foods retailer, Sprouts, which has really made plant-based products a clear strategic priority. So in their 2023 impact report, they highlighted that sales of plant-based products grew by 22%, and really emphasized the key role these products are playing in reducing their environmental footprint. And a key piece of their success appears to be this integrated marketing and in-store promotions campaign they're doing, really smartly titled Plant-Based Tastes Great, which directly tackles one of the top consumer barriers in plant-based purchases, which is concerns about taste. You can see they've used a range of tactics to elevate plant-based visibility and appeal, from big shelf tags that say plant-based to large signage to help consumers find these products, integrated product placement, and an inclusion in a wide variety of their marketing materials. Alongside this, they've actually really invested in expanding their plant-based offerings as well. And one last example here, Ahold Delhaize has committed to achieving a 50-50 balance between animal-based and plant-based protein sales across its European brands by 2030. And this is probably the most ambitious target we've seen from a major retailer, as it doesn't just target a percentage growth for the plant-based products, but is actually addressing the balance between plant-based and animal protein sales. And in doing this, they've, recognize that a significant portion of those emissions are coming from their sourced animal-based products. So rebalancing is really the most effective way to meet their climate goals. All right, real quick before we get to Q&A, just want to share a couple of key levers to support consumer adoption for those who are diversifying their protein portfolios. We know taste is the leading consideration for consumers when shopping, and products that taste like meat is the leading motivator for purchasing more plant-based meat alternatives specifically. Yet we often hear that taste is cited as a top barrier to trying plant-based meats, both for those who haven't tried the category and for those who've purchased but then haven't purchased again. This graph here is from Nectar's recent Taste of the Industry report. They tested over 100 products with over 2,500 consumers. Overall, they found animal-based products score significantly higher in consumer liking than the average plant-based products, which highlights both the current challenge but the significant opportunity for the sector. The study also shows that improvement is clearly possible. So in every category they tested, the top performing plant-based product scored significantly higher than the category average. And a standout example is from the nugget category, where the average product actually matched the average plant-based product matched the conventional nugget on liking, and the leading one even outperformed the conventional nugget. You can see some of the top formulation opportunities they've noted here. And there are a lot of interesting innovations to address these top flavor and texture challenges, from fat and moisture solutions, such as improved fat encapsulation or the use of some of these novel ingredient technologies, to new texturization methods. There's improvements in extrusion, 3D printing, shear cell technology, and there's also opportunities to look at ingredient processing innovations to remove or deactivate some of the off notes that are common in plant protein sources. Price is another critical consideration, especially in today's economic climate, where we know a majority of consumers are concerned about inflation. And high prices are cited as one of the leading motivators for consumers when they are reducing their animal-based meat consumption. So that presents an opportunity for plant-based meat. However, the products do still remain at a pretty steep price premium compared to conventional meat, particularly in the US. We see a premium of about 1.5 to 2 times the cost of the conventional animal counterparts. And this creates a real barrier. A third of US consumers say they would eat more plant-based meats if it were more affordable. And then health concerns are another opportunity here. So we know concerns about the health of animal-based foods are a #1 reason cited by consumers who are shifting towards plant-based options. And about 50% of shoppers who are reducing their animal product consumption say they view plant-based foods as healthier alternatives. So while health is a major motivator for consumers here, we also know consumers are increasingly associating plant-based meat alternatives with being processed, which can create a bit of a credibility gap that has an opportunity to be addressed. So emphasizing the health benefits of plant-based options may support greater consumer adoption, and clear and transparent messaging around ingredient quality and nutritional profiles may also help to build trust and overcome some of those concerns. So I went through that pretty quickly, so we had time for questions here. Thank you all so much for your time and attention today. There's 2 resources here that I want to point out. If you'd like to stay up to date on opportunities in alt proteins, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter using the first link. And if you're looking for more industry reports, tools, or insights, those can be found on the second link here. So with that, we're going to open it up and take your questions. Okay. Let's see. Think the first question we have here for WBA, does WBA provide technical assistance to support companies making protein diversification commitments to maximize their likelihood of achieving them? Ryan?
Yes, thanks, Karen. And I did notice, colleagues, that you've mentioned quite a few number of questions for WBA, especially its benchmark methodology. So I'll try to maybe say a little bit brief, so maybe Christoph could have some time, and I'll maybe answer the rest via chat. So I've been taking a look at the questions, but just to answer the first one, yes. So our engagement team at WBA, what we do is that we try to engage with companies directly and also stakeholders. That includes experts and technical experts through, for example, communities of practice, roundtables with investors and those companies as well, to be able to provide that technical assistance. So we do have that engagement with companies, and when it's necessary to provide technical assistance, of course, our alliance, because we are an alliance of stakeholders who have the technical expertise, do step in to try to support those companies when necessary. So yeah, that's on the first question. Maybe I could jump just to tackle a few of them and then maybe send it back to you, Caroline. Is that fine?
That sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I did like the question on ultra processed foods because it does open a new horizon of thinking. So we do have another indicator on our benchmark, which is how are companies identifying or performing on healthier portfolios and diet diversification in general. For now, or traditionally, what we used to ask companies is to take a look at the proportion of salt, fat, and sugar in their products. What we're now asking companies more is to start with identifying a nutrient profile model. So for ultra processed foods, that could look like the Nova 4 system that has been present for decades now. There are other kinds of nutrient profile models like the Health Star rating, for example. So we don't really ask the companies to abide by a certain one of these nutrient profile models, but we do ask that they do identify that. And then how do they assess themselves, or how do they improve the nutritional quality of their products based on the nutrient profile model that they've used, is what we ask. Now, is there one that is better at identifying ultra processed foods than another? I think this is a conversation that we could definitely have afterwards. We can collaborate as organizations. If one of them actually has more accuracy towards identifying ultra processed foods, then I think this is where the advocacy part could come into, where we socialize this with governments, with UN agencies, with investors, to adopt that nutrient profile model more than others, and then companies could be improving themselves using that model. So that's on the ultra processed foods. Yeah, there was one point I also wanted to make about affordability. And so that probably goes into how the true cost accounting of food could be tackled. So definitely when governments step in, or when we're talking about subsidy reform, that definitely has to take into consideration whether, for example, taxing meat and so on and so forth, how viable could that solution be in global south communities and within their fragile markets, for example. That's something to also take into consideration when we are trying to do the diversification, or maybe putting the actual true price of these foods, because very often you find these alternative protein products a little bit higher end when it comes to affordability, and it does certainly attract a certain audience or certain niche of customers who can afford that. And so, yeah, I want just to stress that point. For the sake of time, I'm going to stop here, but if there's anything, I'll type it in the chat.
Thanks so much, Ryan. I'm gonna head to some of the questions I see for Nestlé here. I know we are at time for the participants, so understand many of you might need to drop off, but we do have so many questions. I'm just gonna keep us going for a few minutes for anyone who would like to stay on to hear those answered. So Christoph, are you considering fermentation-based products, and how do you see the market and consumer expectations around it?
So we are, as I showed you, we are considering within our networks all potential sources of proteins, not only plant but fermented can also be an alternative. What we just need to find out is what's the relevance for which type category of product, and if we find that the benefit are there, this is something which we can also consider, providing that from a regulatory point of view, from a safety point of view, everything is clear. So we are not focused only on plant proteins. We have a broad portfolio of products. We are considering many alternatives.
Thank you. And how do you collaborate with external partners to drive the development of better products?
So either we have actually one-to-one partnerships, or and this is something I wanted to maybe touch on. We also have actually accelerators within our different businesses, which allow us actually to work with some startups which maybe are more advanced and would benefit from our, I would say, knowledge or distribution channels, or I would say technical knowledge to develop their products. So these are ways we can also collaborate with external partners.
Thank you. And a question, if Nestlé is working on cultivated product development, and if not, what types of products do you think Nestlé would potentially explore with cultivated technology?
So these are actually technologies which we are following, but I cannot comment more than that on potential developments.
All right. Somebody asked about how the trial launch of animal-free dairy performed. I don't know if there's anything you're able to share on that.
Or just as a feedback, clearly the communication on such type of ingredients and the benefits to the consumer is still to be worked on. So it's not easy for most of the consumer to understand how you can deliver dairy products while actually you are communicating that it's non-dairy, while actually the protein is from dairy. So I think a lot of communication still to be worked on.
Okay, thanks. Someone asked, what are the key properties that your team looks for bringing a new alt protein into consideration from like an ingredient standpoint? They found the chart on ingredient sources interesting.
So for that, I mean, it's very broad, depends really on the application. So it goes from solubility to a gel forming properties, combined actually with nutrition. So we really have to look broadly at all the properties of the proteins, and then basically from the results, choose in which application it makes more sense actually to be applied or not. Well, I just give you an example. If you have a protein which is fully soluble, maybe the likelihood that you will apply it in a liquid product is higher than if you would like to texturize it and put it in an extrusion type of product. So, but this you have to generate all this knowledge. It's not that it's given and it's readily available.
Great. And there's a couple of questions I'm going to combine into one here around, the motivation for your hybrid approach, and kind of some questions around the why blending dairy and soy.
So dairy and soy is one of the options which we have launched. So it's really to address nutrition, but as well affordability. I think it was mentioned by Ryan. In some countries, milk is quite an expensive ingredient with all the volatility which you described. The idea also with the soy is to be able to combine some of the nutritional properties also, like the fiber content, which you don't have in milk. So it's an additional nutritional benefit which you can deliver to the consumers. We do not have only dairy plant hybrids. We also have a range of products which was developed for South America, but also Africa, which allows to combine actually meat or egg together with some plant proteins in order actually to deliver more affordable solutions while keeping actually a nutritional value of the product.
Great. I think that gets us through most of the questions for Nestlé. And Rayan, I'm just going to give you one question that seems like a good one for us to end on here. What would the consequences be for the companies not proactively working to fill the gaps you detected in protein diversification?
Yes, I expected you're gonna pull out that question, and I didn't want to answer it via chat because it needs elaboration. Obviously, what is consequential to companies is customers, their choice, their selection, governments, regulation. So we're talking about regulation. And third is investor influence. When those three are aligned on expectations on what companies need to be doing on protein diversification, then it will be consequential. But I mean, obviously, it's much more complex than we say, and try to keep my answer quite short because we ran out of time. But if investors take into account the true cost accounting, government regulations are aligned with what need to be done to incentivize and de-incentivize conventional animal products, and then consumers are actually demanding a switch, then of course that definitely will show the transition naturally as a consequence. Yeah.
Okay. Well, a huge thank you to you both for sharing your expertise with us today, and a thank you to our audience for your participation and staying with us a few minutes over here. As a reminder, today's session has been recorded. It will soon be available on our YouTube channel, and we'll also email all registrants a copy. And lastly, we really do encourage you to share your ideas and feedback with us. So please do feel free to email us at corporate@gfi.org or reach out to any of us directly. Thank you again, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day.